Welcome to the Airflow Podcast. I'm your host, Rickey Thomas, and this is the place where Kingdom heirs go to be informed and inspired. So sit back, relax, and flow with me. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Airflow Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Rickey Thomas, and I just thank you all for joining me today for this episode of the podcast. So for this episode, I wanted to focus on self-knowledge, and I think it's so important for us as individuals, especially, with everything going on with how social media and other forms of things can impact us and our outlook on ourselves and on our outlook on the world. It's so important, I think, to take a step back and really evaluate, for some people, reevaluate and understand who you are, who you have grown to be, because I think through time, there are certain things that changes in your life as you continue to grow and mature, and it should. But having self-knowledge, knowing who you are, there are certain things that are benefits that come with that. So I want to go over a couple of some of the benefits, and then I want to get into ways of how to really find out who you are. So when we start talking about benefits of self-knowledge, one is happiness. If you think about it, you'll be happy and happier as a person when you can express who you are. You can express your desires, and just understand that expressing those desires will make it more likely that you can get what you want. And getting what you want is because you understand you're more focused on things and you have more of a drive and more of a kind of a mindset to do it, because you understand what it is that what makes you happy, and you seek that. Another benefit is that there's less inner conflict. So, when your outside actions, are working in accordance with kind of your inside feelings and values, there's less conflict. There's less feeling of shame and guilt and all that other stuff. So you're not working against yourself in the process. Another benefit as better decision making. So, knowing yourself, and when you know yourself, you're able to make better choices about everything from small decisions to, big decisions about like who you're going to marry and, places where you want to live and things like that. So you kind of establish these guidelines that you can apply to solve, different problems and challenges that come up in life. One of the big things that you get in knowing yourself is self-control, because what kind of motivates you and what motivates you, and you'll be able to resist bad habits and develop good ones. And it gives you insight to know the values and goals that will activate your willpower. And sometimes it sounds crazy because a lot of people live off that whole YOLO mentality, which you only live once. And so sometimes self-control goes out of the window, for the sake of living in the moment. And I think there's always a time and a place to live in the moment. But if you've got certain values and things, it sort of keeps you from making a in the moment decision or living in the moment experience that will have a lifetime ripple effect of something that is bad. So, and there's differences to that. The other benefit that you have is a resistance to social pressure. So, when you're grounded in your values, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, and in your preferences, you are less likely to say yes when you want to say no. And I say social pressure, but that can be pressure from anybody. You have to be okay to say no. Now it's because you don't want to compromise who you are, because when you start doing that, then you'll continue to go down that path, and that causes some of that inner conflict, and you're losing self-control, you're not making good decisions, and things just go off the rails. So being able to resist, and again, it's all to it's all to think about. It's all for you to think about just where you're going to go with things. Why are you resisting this, or why is this coming to you? Why do they feel it's okay to come to you? And that just goes back into, as we'll talk about it later, about knowing who you are. your tolerance and understanding of others will be heightened when you know who you are. So you kind of have you've got an awareness of your own struggles and things. And so it can help you empathize with others. And empathy and sympathy is two different things, but at least you'll be able to have an understanding because, everybody, I'll use this quote that my dad uses all the time. Everybody isn't able. Everybody ain't able. I mean, everybody is not in a place where they understand who they are. And knowing that we all have been in that place, some of us are redefining what that means and going back through and trying to find out who we are. So we've been at a place we've seen like my wife and I, our teenagers, we've got 3 teenagers in the house and a preteen now, and just understanding with them what they're experiencing, and being able to say, yes, we've been through that point. And sometimes as parents, we have to take a step back and reassess our mentality around it. And we have to remember that we were once that age. And so, our tolerance sometimes gets a little low because we want to talk about my kids. Now, when we talk about adults, it's a little different, but I think it gives us that, and it gives us the ability to have empathy because we know who we are and we're secure in that and knowing who we are. So we understand when we see people that are still struggling to find themselves, and you kind of have a better idea of things. And then kind of the last benefit of self-knowledge is you've got a sense of vitality and pleasure. That means, being who you truly are, it will help you to feel alive, and it'll make your experience, the experience that you have of life, richer and more exciting. You will definitely feel good about who you are, and life will be worth living because you're striving towards those things that you desire to do or be, and you're living out your truth, as a lot of people like to say. And that comes in so many ways, but, and that's why I want to get into some of the things that you can drill down into to find out who you are. So I want to dig and start going through some of that now. And hopefully, through this, if there, guys can go back and replay some of this information. But the ultimate goal is that, think about where you stand in your knowledge of who you are today. And have you ever actually assessed where you are? Some people, do you care? Some people don't. But your response to knowing who you are or not caring about who you are or caring who you are, will define the people that choose to be around you. So some of this is that it's important for you to know who you are, but it's helpful too, because if you know who you are, it'll define the relationships for those that are around you. So one of the things that when you start on this journey of kind of seeking knowledge of self is knowing what do you like and not like. So you have to ask yourself that question. What do I like? What don't I like? And what most people find is that they spend more time thinking about or focusing on what they like. Because of course everybody wants to focus on where the satisfaction or gratification is and everything. And that's nothing wrong, and it's important to figure out what brings you joy or happiness. But it's also equally important to understand what causes you unhappiness or dissatisfaction. Because sometimes, people, you ask somebody, well, what do you like to do? And some people will say, well, it's hard to do. I like to do this. And they give very general things. And it's like, okay, so when you ask them to talk about, well, what don't you like? Sometimes people can be more detailed about what they don't like. And that can help drive the focus of, okay, I know what I don't like. And now understand what I don't like. I probably do like these things. I like this better. I want to do this better. So it helps to balance out the equation and you understanding, what are your likes and don't like and what don't you like. And what you also find is that what you like and don't like is very much so attached to how you describe yourself to others. And those things can either separate you from other people or bring you together. So you think about the people that you associate with or that are your friends that you spend time with. There has to be some sort of commonality between you. And a lot of times it's about likes and unlikes, things that make you happy or things that don't make you happy. And a lot of times that brings people together. But, having knowledge of these likes and unlikes, will help you to choose things like a career path, where you want to live, hobbies, people you want to hang with, even somebody that you want to marry. And I see that sometimes in marriages that it's hard for two people who don't know who they are. They get married because they do love each other, but as they grow and start figuring out who they are, they change in the dynamic, and the person that they thought was the person they were supposed to be with turns out to not be the right person for them when they really figure out what they like and don't like. So I think that those are some of the things that, when we start to talk about that, that's one of the first key things is, what are your likes and dislikes? And this is something that you ask yourself. And it may be good. Here's an activity, and I've done this before, and it's something that it's probably good to do every so often, just to keep tabs of, understanding where you are. So, take a sheet of paper, and split it down the middle, and one side, write things that you're good at. On the other side, write things that you're challenged at. And, when a lot of people do that, you start to figure out that a lot of what you're good at or what you're challenged at will kind of coincide with your strengths and weaknesses. And so that's kind of, the next play is, once you kind of know what you like and don't like, you should also look at, well, what are you good at and what do you feel like you're a little challenged in? Like I said, it will coincide with what you like and don't like. And just understanding that in many ways, the things that challenge us usually are aligned with the things that we dislike. So just understanding that, if you're uncomfortable with something, well, typically you're going to tend to dislike that particular part about you or that activity, and it just all ties together. So try that activity, and I think that will help to form the things that or get you to understand what you like and don't like, and then, it all should tie into strengths and weaknesses. The next thing is really understanding what brings you comfort. So we learn a lot from ourselves when we're at our highest point. When we're happy, we can say, yeah, this makes me feel good, and I like this, and I love this about this time frame when things are great. But then you can also get a great understanding of yourself when you are in those periods of challenges, or, the valleys or the low periods. So think about times when you're down or you may be stressed out, and then understand from a comfort standpoint, what kind of comfort are you seeking out? When you're stressed, or, when you're down and you're just not feeling like yourself and it's not a great day, how do you get through that? For some people, it can be prayer. It can be, food. It can be spending time with a person who's a good listener. It could be, going out with a significant other on a date just to get away, taking a vacation. It could be reading a book, exercise. But understanding what you like to do that gets you into a place of comfort, that helps to understand who you are, because that comfort zone is what you always try to seek in your down times. But so when you're happy, we know that those kind of things can help bring you happiness. So now you can kind of pull it all together. And it tells you a lot, and it can also help to figure out certain things. Like, I know people that when they're stressed, they eat. I guess that's what they're called, emotional eaters. So when people are gaining weight, they're just going, and food brings them comfort. And that's nothing to be, joked about, because there are a lot of people that do that. They don't do drugs and alcohol, but it's food. And that brings them their comfort to get them back to a place where they can center themselves and, relax. So there are a lot of things that people do, but it's good to understand, because again, if you know that about yourself, and you're somebody who's trying to lose weight or get in better health conditions, and yourself, well, hey, I've got to find some other activities to get out of this. I got out of this state of, whether it's depression or just down, so that you're not resorting to food. And that's where that knowledge of self really comes in place. Another thing you can do is to understand who you are and get that knowledge of yourself is taking note of your thoughts and emotions. And a lot of people do that through journaling, writing a journal, And it seems, I remember, back in the day, I used to hear about and it was always, girls who would have diaries, and they would write in their diaries different things. And journaling and writing in diaries are close, but it just, you're writing out thoughts and things that took place, and talking about, sort of how your emotions were during that time. And so it's a good way to track things, because now you can go back and look at it and think, okay, well, what topics came up during that time? A lot of people suggest you should try it for at least a week. Some say a month, and you start to get a baseline of things by looking at what things constantly came up on a daily basis. And then when those certain instances came up, on a reoccurring time, then what were the thoughts that were associated with those items? Were they positive mostly? Were they negative? And so when you do that, you're able to figure out kind of what are the themes and what are the driving factors of a lot of your thoughts and emotions on a daily basis. Is it a situation about bills being paid? Is it a challenge with a spouse or a significant other? Problems with a sibling or a child, or something that just you're not happy with. You're not happy in your living conditions, your career, a relationship with parents. They're just anything that you can associate and say, I seem to talk about this one thing over and over again, or I seem to experience certain feelings or certain thoughts around this topic, and it happens quite a bit. Those are things that you can use from a journaling perspective. And, sometimes writing it out. I know some people that have done, I've seen where they do voice journals, and they just use now you can use your cell phone and you can just record entries. But it's just some way that you can go back and kind of do an assessment of your thoughts, your feelings, and figure out like what was going on and what do I deal with? Because again, knowing yourself and being able to take note of that, now you can have some clear-cut evidence and some real tangible things that you can go back and try to work through. So I think that's very important. Another thing that a lot of people don't really do and don't think about, some jobs, request or require folks to do this, especially when you want to be promoted, is a personality test. And understanding your personality type is important. So why do certain companies want to do personality tests? Sometimes it's just, especially when you move into a management role or move into a role where you're going to be interacting with a lot of people, they want to see what kind of person you are. What drives your personality? And these assessments, they're online now. Some of them are free, and it's good to have this kind of information for yourself, because it's kind of a guide to give you kind of an understanding of why you are the way that you are. And some people like it because of that. It puts order in their lives. It helps them kind of gather their thoughts about themselves in a way. And then some don't like it because they don't want to be labeled a certain personality type. But it's good to know, at least get a baseline with these free exams. But I want people to understand, and I put this disclaimer out there that, these free exams are not 100%, in terms of used as baselines. I think they can be used as baselines, but they're not 100% valid in terms of really evaluating who you are. But it gives you a good working understanding of that. But if you really want a true and a more in-depth analysis of, your personality type and some of these things, then it'll be great. And I would advise you to seek out, a clinical psychologist who can really walk you through it and give you a good assessment. Because self-diagnosing things online, it can help you at least get get in the ballpark of where you might be. But if you're really challenged by some of that and you really want to have some hardcore conversation and some real, concrete things that you can say, I can take this and from somebody who's a licensed professional, be able to get that information, please seek a clinical psychologist, because it will help you to get even more confirmed about what it is that who you are as a personality. The next thing is what are your core values? And core values, I know that for some people, their core values are based off of off of their religious beliefs, and that's fine. Some people have core values that are around, certain things of it. They served in the military. They take values from that. But what are the things that you govern your life by? What do you live by? Are they biblical principles? Do you follow like family first and, or things like equality, justice, peace, integrity, accountability? What are the things that you can say that kind of shaping who you are? Like those are the boundaries that you try to stay within. Because without knowing these values, you really can't ensure that the choices that you're making in your life are aligned with those values, aligned with values that you have. So you don't know what governs you. So if you don't know core values, and most of us have values, everybody has some level of value or some set of codes that they live by. And when those codes or those labels or those values are violated, there should be something internally in you that sort of, triggers you to say, this isn't right. For some people, again, if you're a believer, one of the biggest things that you govern your life off of, and, it's not necessarily, I guess you can't call it a core value, but it's sort of that internal alarm system is the Holy Spirit. But the values that you live by, if you are a believer, are biblical, should be biblical principles, not religious doctrine, but principles from the Bible specifically. And I think that's important to go by that, because a lot of times, we get into these debates, about from a different standpoint in these different religions about interpretations of the Bible, but there are certain things that are kind of written out as pretty straightforward things. And, we tend to want to put them in different spins to angle it in the right way that we can skirt by certain things. But the value is the value, whether you believe it or not, whether it's, no matter if it's out of date based off of our society, these are values that you should always live by, respecting your parents, that should be a value that is continuously taught. But sometimes that just gets thrown out of the window, different things within the marriage relationship. There are values that you should have, within your relationships. Do you honor those values? So those are things that really are guiding principles for you. And I think, again, understanding what those values are, and they're your values. Nobody can tell you what you should value, but you've got to understand what things are that you value. Hopefully it's not material things. Hopefully that's not, being rich, because that's really not a value. That's just a superficial sort of thing that you can't take that with you when you're gone. So when people when you look back at your life and you ask somebody like, well, what they should be able to say what values that you live by. Were you a person of integrity? Were you a person that was that loved family? Were you always, out trying to, or you accountable for the things that you did wrong? Were you responsible? That's what you want people to look at you by and say that, speak to you or speak about you when you're gone. That's the legacy you leave behind. You can leave behind money and that's all they know. Well, yeah, he left us money or she left us money. That's great. But that doesn't tell me about your life. And so that brings you to the next thing is, are you living a life that you are proud of? And, some people, again, you really got to do some introspection of yourself and look at your life and say to yourself, it's not that I'm proud of where I come from. Yeah, it's always great to say I've come a long way and I'm proud of that. And if you're and if that is where your pride is based off of, then you were doing something that wasn't representative of who you are, who your parents raised you to be, who your family is, and now you're in a place where you're understanding who you are and understanding what you like and dislike, and you're like, what, now I'm living for myself, and in my living for myself, I understand, that I am proud of where I am now. I'm proud of the hurdles that I had to jump. I'm proud of the challenges that I overcame. I'm not happy about the things that I did, to some of the things I had to do to get to this point, but I am happy that I got here. I didn't give up, but thinking about that, are you living a life that you're proud of? Or are you just getting by or surviving and living each day? And some people are like, hey, I'm taking care of my responsibility, so I'm proud of that. But is that the life that you're really proud of? Or is it just, I'm taking care of responsibilities? Because that's what you're supposed to do. But are you proud of who you are and the person that you are? So when you look at who you are and the person that you've become, so if you look in the mirror and look at yourself and say, you know what, I'm happy. There's some things I got to work on. I'm not perfect, but I'm happy of who I am right now. And I know that I'm going to continue to grow and learn and develop. But that's a question that you ask yourself. One of the next things that I think is important, and, a lot of people tie this thing into the fiber of their life is money. And this question that you ask yourself is, what would you do? What would you love to do if money wasn't an issue? I'm going to say that again. What would you love to do if money wasn't an issue? What dreams have you had that you felt have been deferred or deterred because of money? Was it a trip that you've always wanted to take? Was it that house that you didn't think you can afford? Was it the vehicle? Was it, being able to, pay off your mother or your parents' mortgage? Was it to be able to buy yourself that dream car? What would you want to go to do certain things for charity, give to the kingdom? I mean, what if money wasn't an issue? If money's not a challenge, what would you love to do? You might be asking, well, why is that important? Well, because a lot of people base their lives, they base things about themselves on the money that they have at that point in time, because they can't see themselves outside of the reality of their financial status. They don't dream big because they don't see it. They see it as something that they have to do themselves. So when they do dream, they quickly get snapped back into their current reality, thinking that they'll never get to that point. And that is something that, again, knowing who you are and knowing yourself is important, because some people, again, base a lot about their lives on money. How would you live your life if your financial status wasn't an issue? If money just wasn't a thing, if money was, I got all the money in the world, what would you do? Would you just sit around and kind of be to yourself? Would you be more social? Would you be more giving? Because, again, money, they always say that money would tell a lot about a person. And I've heard people say that money is just, when people have money, is just an extension of, it accentuates who they are or embellishes more of who they are as a person. If you get money and you become more flamboyant and this, that, and the other, well, it's just something that was part of you to begin with. Some people get money and they're still humble. They're just giving at a bigger stage, and so those are things that you want to think about, because money is a big factor in how people live their lives and how people think about themselves. The next thing would be, and this one, I think for me is one of the things that hit me the most is, and it is, how would your life be if you weren't afraid of failing? Now, I know for me, I've missed out on a lot of things because I was afraid of failing. And I say missed out. I didn't start a lot of things because I was just afraid of failing, and people would tell me like, oh, you just seem so confident about certain things. And I'm like, I've not done stuff because I was like, I don't want to fail. I don't want to take this risk, even though I did all the homework. I think I mentioned this before, but just risking investments, risking this or that. I don't care how much I studied it. I was just afraid that I was going to fail. And understanding that self-doubt, can really define your life. And if you don't, and especially if you don't work to overcome it, so that self-doubt would definitely define who you are for your whole life. And you start talking about, Disney has this Marvel show called What If? And, in it takes different scenarios of Marvel characters and puts them in different situations than what we're accustomed to seeing them in. And, it just gives fans a kind of a glimpse of how things could be if there was some alternate universe. Well, when you start thinking about self-doubt, self-doubt will create a ton of what if scenarios when you get older, and you're trapped in your head, thinking like, man, what if I would have did this, or if I would have made that decision? And, that's where the whole thing with failure, self-doubt and failure really tied in together. If you're thinking you're not going to be able to do it, you're doubting, you're not betting on yourself. And then you come later on to realize I could have done that and I should have done that. And now look at me, and I tell that to my kids, especially my older two who are involved in sports. I always tell them the last thing you want to do is look back on, your time as an athlete. They both play basketball. And I tell them, I said, look, this is your life. Basketball is the thing that you guys want to do. It's something that you like doing. You love it, and you got to put in the work. But if you're playing, when you go out there on the floor and you're playing in a game and you're more worried about failing than just going out there and playing the game that you know how to play, you're going to mess yourself up. And then you're going to put a lot of those what if scenarios. What if I just didn't worry about that and I just went out there and played better? What scout would have seen me, or how could I have helped my team better if I would have just gotten out of my own way? So a lot of that stuff, again, is part of the process, but you don't want to have those what ifs. How many people today, are sitting at home, looking at a, a relationship that they decided not to pursue or, to take to the next place because they were afraid of, the commitment, or afraid of, the relationship failing because of, just anything, because of their parents' relationships or people that they were close to or previous relationships. And then time goes on and that person moves on, and you sit back and you look at, man, I could have been with that person. My life would have been a whole lot different. Thank God, I don't have that experience, because I'm definitely happy about where I am. There's some scenarios where you look and say, well, if I would have done that, I definitely wouldn't have been where I am today. And I wouldn't have had the blessings that God had for me based off of marrying the woman that I love and that is the mother of my children. So, those what if scenarios I don't care too much about. But again, just understanding that you want to limit those what if scenarios, and you do that by, not being afraid to fail. Don't think about the failing part, just understanding that those failures will come, but it's part of life. And so kind of the next piece is understanding that, how do you overcome the fear of failure? When we talk about, how your life would be if you're not afraid of failing, how do you overcome that fear? Well, one, you got to know that failure is necessary. You're always going to have times when you fail, and it's how you adjust and how you take to the failure, and the outcome that you have, and outlook that you have on failure. It's really going to determine if it's going to create a what if scenario and basically cause you to go into this cocoon of not wanting to do anything because you're afraid of that feeling of failure. But you have to use your mistakes and your failures as a lesson. And I've said it before, there are no L's when people say you L. There's no L's for losses in life. The L is for lessons. You take a L because you're learning. You're getting a lesson. You didn't lose. If you can't keep that mindset of, I didn't lose. I may not have gotten the result that I wanted at that point in time, but I've learned something valuable that I can use to help me move forward. You didn't lose anything. You just may have lost a little bit of time, but that knowledge you've gained from the process will help speed up time at the next time. The other part of, when we start talking about how to overcome fear of failure is to focus more on the success of the situation, whatever it is. Don't focus on the failures. A lot of people don't move forward in how they do things, or, projects that they want to work on, or certain entrepreneurial things that they want to pursue. They don't do it because they start thinking about all the failing points that either them or other people have experienced in the past, and they've shared that. And then you start focusing on failures, like, oh man, I don't want to put all this time and energy and money and lose out on things. And now, I'm sitting here and I haven't gotten any further, and I really have that failure to lift off because I just haven't taken the time to put myself up and say, I need to just focus on the success. I need to see the ending at the beginning. What is the end result? And keep my eye on that. I've heard several people in the real estate world who talk about, projects where they're flipping, a home, or flipping a commercial property, or, multi-tenant dwellings. One example is my pastor, Apostle Amos Howard. He talked about his last project that he worked on, turning a group of apartments that he had into high luxury apartments, and just the process that he had to go through to get through it. And most people would have probably quit because of all the hurdles that were put in his way, all the challenges that were put out there for he and his wife. And, but they stayed the course with it because they saw the end result. They understood not only from the financial standpoint, but just what that end result meant for his family and the generations that will come, after them. If God, as he likes to say, if God should tarry, the generations after him will reap the benefit from him staying the course. So visualize the success in anything, whether it's, relationships, life, sports, whatever it is that you're working towards, school. See yourself as graduating. I mean, I remember there was times when I was at TSU, and I just wanted to quit. I'm like, man, I'm tired of this. And I think I said it before, but I kept thinking about the end result. I kept thinking of my mom and dad and, siblings and just loved ones, and then people that I was classmates with, just thinking about that graduation day of us standing there and the pride and joy that they felt. And that was a moment that I wanted for myself. Not that I just wanted it for them, but I wanted it for myself, because I'm like, I've been putting in all this work. Why would I get so close to the end and just leave it all there? And so for me, I was like, no, I got to keep pushing. I got to keep going. But I didn't focus on the challenges and difficulties of some of the classes that I had to take, or people saying that class is hard, and, getting so focused on and caught up on the difficulties that I'm like, I can fail. And if I fail and I got to do this, I might have to take this class over. I might have to stay longer. You just start having those thought processes, and your mind just wanders. So I stayed on that piece because I know for me, fear is just, that's one of those things that I try not to focus on. I just try to, keep moving forward. Don't let the small failures derail you from reaching the bigger goal. And knowing what that goal is, and that's why it's good to have goals, so you can set targets and hey, I know what the end result is going to be. It's just like investing. If you do your homework and you invest smartly and you're patient with it, you can make a ton of money in investing, whether it's, properties, from real estate, or, from stocks or crypto, whatever it is. You just believe, you stay the course, and at the end, you'll see the goal that you visualize. Another thing is, ask people that you trust for their honest interpretations of you as a person. And that kind of goes with, if you're not afraid of failing, because some people are afraid to ask people for how their perception or just how they view them. They're afraid to ask that because they're afraid to hear kind of, I wouldn't say a negative thing, but just something they have to work on. Some people avoid certain conversations with certain people because they're going to hear they're not going to necessarily hear the good. They're going to hear the truth. And that's why I noted that making sure that it's people that you trust for their honest interpretations of you as a person. Because sometimes people, we do have yes men in our life, yes men and women who they don't know how to be open and honest with you about certain situations or certain things. So they just feel like it's best to tell you from this point, and I think even for my wife and I, there's times where, we try to hide or not hide, but we try to guard each other's feelings instead of being true and honest about certain things. And so through our marriage, we've had to evolve and say, you know what, you and I should be able to say certain things based out of our love for each other and know that it comes from a place of love, not a place of anger, not a place of, to tear you down or anything. And it's important to do that because, again, I want to know, and it hurts, but, I have to ask her at times, like, what can I do to be a better husband? And sometimes, and there's been times where she gets frustrated and, it's like, well, we had this conversation. I'm like, I know. And and same thing on my side, it's like, okay, she'll say, well, what do you think I need to work on? And sometimes it's hard and sometimes we get defensive, but we come back to it after we come out of that emotional, that emotional roller coaster and just get out of our feelings and ego. And it's like, okay, I asked you the question because I wanted to hear it, and I want to be better. And that's why we communicate like that. So I get that honest interpretation, because if I'm failing as a husband, and if I'm even asking my kids, if I'm failing as a father, in their eyes, let's talk about that. Let's figure out what that is and have those, honest conversations. One of the next things that when we talk about knowledge of self is, understanding how you connect with other people. And more so is, are you an introvert, an extrovert? And introverts doesn't necessarily mean that you're shy and you're just like this meek and just kind of hunched over, unconfident person. A lot of people are introverts because they just prefer to do things alone. They don't have to be around other people. Where extroverts, they like to be very social. Again, they don't need other people to be successful, but they prefer to be in a more social scene. I look at my wife and myself. I think there's nobody that's just kind of in the middle. There's most people that are spread out around the spectrum. There are times that, my wife and I just like spending a quiet weekend at home, after a long week of, work and activities with the kids. And, for us, we just like, we want to chill. And then there's some times where it's like, we need to get out. Let's get out and do some stuff, and we'll go out, go out to eat, go. Well, sometimes we used to go to the movies or just get out go to something different. Like this, we just recently went to go see the Dave Chappelle comedy show. Just get out and do something different. Now, for us where we live at now, to drive to downtown Nashville, it's about an hour, but it's worth it. The drive was worth it. The trip was worth it because we just got an opportunity to get away and just, spend some time away. So will I classify myself as an introvert or an extrovert? I think it's up for interpretation. I think I'm more of an extrovert than my wife is, but there are situations where she's more extroverted than me. So again, I think the common misconception is that somebody is like just smack dab one or the other, and that's not necessarily the case. I think I'm more of an extrovert than not. But again, that's just me understanding who I am and my wife understanding who she is, and that's how we complement each other in a lot of ways. So take an assessment. Look up different things about introverts and extroverts, and just do an assessment on yourself and say, okay, it looks like I'm more of an introvert, but I do have some extrovert ways, or vice versa, and again, it's just good to know that. Why do you prefer to be at home by yourself, on a Friday night versus being out, hanging out with the rest of the crew? Not to say that you don't do it, but you're not mad if those times come about. Like I say, some people just they want to be out, and that's okay. That's just part of their It's part of their personality and it's part of who they are. Another thing that kind of want to look at is, what kind of friend are you? You can tell a lot about yourself by the type of friend that you are. Part of knowing yourself and understanding your expectations, feelings, and actions, is how they relate to relationships. So, when you talk about friends and the kind of friend you are, do you talk to your friends daily, or is it like every once in a while? Are you the person who arranges times for your friends to hang out, you and your friends to hang out, or, is it just one of those things where you're waiting to be invited to an activity with friends or a particular friend? Do you value spending quality time with your friends? And that's important, because people talk about spending quality time with their significant others and obviously their kids, but do you have relationship, with friends that are close friends? Do you foster those relationships by actually trying to spend time with them, if possible? From a friend's perspective, do you have close friends that you feel like you can share intimate details about yourself? Or are you just very secretive and guarded about your life with your friends? Again, this is important because it tells more about who you are. And just knowing that, because again, if you're that type of person, you're very guarded, then again, that just is just more things to help you understand who you are. Are you the type of friend that uplifts or encourages your friends, or are you always the one looking to your friends to be uplifted and encouraged? And there's times where we should be both. With friendships, it's a two-way street, but if you're only friends with a certain person because they uplift you, then that friendship isn't really fruitful. It's kind of almost like it's like you're using that person for what they can help you through versus you being there for each other. Another thing is, do you drop everything for your friend in need? Are you that kind of friend? And if there are boundaries to that, or if there's limitations to that, then, again, that's just things that you have to think about when you start talking about the kind of friend you are. And kind of lastly to that, are you content with the friend that you are? And you have to think about it. If you go through and answer those questions, ask yourself those questions and answer them. Are you content with the friend you are? Based off of those answers. And when I say friend, I don't mean these social media friends that you met once in your lifetime and now they're your friends forever. They're BFFs. I'm talking about people who, you break bread with. You've stayed in each other's homes. You've spent time together. You vacation together. You've shared details with people that you've got history with, that you're true friends. How are you okay with that friendship? Are you okay with who you are in that friendship? And I'm talking about really looking at yourself, not the kind of friend they are to you, but knowing the kind of friend that you desire to be. Are you the friend that you desire to be? Or are you the friend that you desire your friends to be to you? I think that's the better way to phrase the question. And it's something that you have to think about. And if you're not that kind of friend, then, talk to your real friends. Talk to those real friends that you value their relationship, you value their information, and see if they can help you to be a better friend. Ask them about that and say, hey, I would love to, I would really love to find out a little bit more. And I want you to be open and honest with me and tell me, what are those things that, what are those things that you think I can help to be a better friend? Do I not reach out? Because I know for a fact, a lot of my friendships have dwindled down partly because of my, I have to take accountability. It's because of me. I put so much time and work in my family that I didn't continue to foster those relationships. And when I talk to some of those friends and, we just talk about it, we catch up and it's like, yeah, life is this and life is that. I mean, I got family members like that. And it's a shame when we get together, it's like we've been talking all along, but it's still a shame that we've got to go gap some time with all the technology and everything. And, it's just it's an indictment of me. I'm publicly rebuking myself for that. And I've got to get better. I've got cousins that live, in the same state, not too far from me, and I hardly see them, so I've got uncles and I got an uncle and aunt here. I've got several relatives around and I just barely see them. And, I always use the excuse of life. And we kind of all do, just life and just everything else, but there's still love. It's not because of, something bad happened, but a lot of it is life. But it doesn't mean that, we don't need to foster those relationships. And like I said, for my part, I've got to do better, regardless of what that person chooses to do. I know that I haven't been the friend or relative that I need to be. So that's some introspection I have to do. Now, do I act on it? That's going to be the other part. I'm holding myself accountable, but part of that accountability has to come with action. So last couple of things, one of the big things too is evaluate the people that's around you. So if you want to know who you are, evaluate the people that are around you. And I've seen it before, and the number always changes, but it says that you're the average of the 5 closest people to you. Now, whether it's 5, whether it's 7, I've heard 7, I've heard different numbers, but regardless, the people that are closest to you, whatever that number is, you are the average of those people. And what it's saying is that the people that you're closest to, they have an impact on you. And it's not to say that you are, that you don't have a mind of your own and, you're letting other people just run your life. That's not what that really means. It just means that people that you're close to have a subtle influence on you, and a subtle impact on you and influence. And the question is, do you see portions of yourself that may be taken from those that are close to you? And if you don't like the person that you are based off of those relationships because you are pulling some of those things from them, then that's when you can reevaluate your relationships. But until you can understand, who you are and then look at the people around you and say, ooh, yeah, I do notice I pick up some of these habits. Or I picked up some of this negative mindset from people, or I pick up some of this, talking, some of the not saying things positive and being optimistic. I'm more pessimistic when I'm around this person, or I'm happy around this person and they always bring my mood up and they help to bring me higher. And that can be the other side of things. You have people around you that are constantly elevating themselves, in the spiritual level, or constantly elevating themselves, physically or through finances, and they're constantly growing and being better, growing to be better, people, better husbands, fathers, mothers, daughters, any kind of that relationship. They're just building and trying to grow and be better. Those are people you want around you. Another saying is that, if you're the biggest fish in your pond, then your pond is too small. The other thing is, if you're the smart, just the same thing. If you're the smartest person in your group of friends, then, you need to elevate your group of friends and you need to change things out. It's not to say your friends are dumb, but it's just to say, hey, if you're trying to grow and be better, and you feel like you're the smartest person around the people that you're with, that you're around mostly, then you got to think about that. Do you need to have other groups of people that you hang around, mentors or things like that, to elevate you? That's a thought to have. And then the last one is, what do you do and who are you as a person when you are alone? That starts to get into the integrity part of things. When nobody's around, who are you? How do you spend your time alone? Do you feel happy alone, or are you empty alone? So those types of things are, just something to really think about. Does your values govern you? If nobody's around, and you always hear the thing is, if somebody dropped $100 on the floor and nobody's around, do you pick it up, or do you turn it in? Those type of questions. We mentioned before, my wife, we were still in our old area that we lived in town. And, she went to the bank and somebody left a wad of cash in the ATM machine. And now my wife could have took it and said, you know what? Ain't nobody around. Nobody saw anything. Nobody came back. It's just literally cash hanging out of this ATM, in the money chute. And she went back in the bank and turned it in. And, she called me and told me. I was like, she was like, what should I do? Now, could we have used that money? Yeah, at that time, we were trying to prepare to do a whole bunch of stuff, and we could have took that money and, used it for this. But, at the same time, it was like, nobody was around, nobody was looking. And she said, you know what, I'm going to take this money back into the bank. She was like, I feel like that's the right thing to do. And so she took it in. Even the people in the bank were looking at her like she was crazy. Like, you turned this back in. And of course, I guess they didn't have a way to really track it. I mean, they can go back through the ATM and figure out what happened and see who was the person who withdrew money out or whatever the case may be. And that person could have been leaving it as a blessing. We don't know, but we understand that, she valued making sure that she had some level of integrity about herself to give somebody their money back, because you never know what they could have been using that money for. And I would hope that somebody would do that to me, unless it was my intention or my wife's intentions to bless somebody with it, just to leave it there. So those are the things that you really want to think about, and take time, go back, listen to it again, but knowing yourself is so important. I've told, people that, I've talked to before, that are single, who are interested in being married. And they always say, well, what do I need to know about being married? And I've told them, I was like, you need to know yourself. You need to know who you are. You can't come into a relationship and not know who you are and then expect to be able to grow with a person. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but think about all the challenges you create from that. I've had situations where I've suggested to people, like, before you move in with somebody, even if you're in the process of getting married, before you move in, at least have an opportunity to have a place of your own. If you can get an apartment, if it's feasible. I know nowadays apartments are expensive, but again, if you want to, be able to live by yourself. And I think I spent some time living by myself and getting to understand who I am through that process. There were nights where my wife, then fiance, and I, when I had my own apartment, there were times where, she was at her place because she had to go to work and I had to go to school. And, we just didn't see each other for a couple of days. It wasn't a lot of that time, but those are times that I spent, just kind of doing some self-reflection, and it's important. Even now, as a, I've been married almost 20 years, 3 kids, and a dog, and I still try to find time in where it's convenient for everybody to, focus on myself. Where I used to live at, to drive out from our old house to where my older 2 kids go to school, or, or my son, our older son, goes to school, it was a 30-something minute drive. And then I had to, when I was going to work, I would drop him off at his bus stop and then drive to my job. So it was about an hour or so trip every day. And in that time, I turned off the radio and I would just spend time just thinking and just kind of almost talking to myself in a way, but just, evaluating things. I didn't think about work. Just thought about what are things I need to do to be better as a husband, as a father, just be a better me, talking to God, just trying to get myself right. So all of that's important. And that's why I want to make sure that everybody just takes that time to understand that knowing who you are is going to be such a great thing when you find out. And and it's not just going to be a one-day thing. It's a journey. But you have to be open and willing to learn. And sometimes you have to be willing to let others in to help you with that. So be very careful about the people you choose to kind of get some feedback about who you are or who they see you as, because you've got to also think about their intentions. If their intentions aren't the best, or their intentions aren't to be truthful, they just want to tell you what they think you want to hear because they don't want to hurt your feelings. You got to have those people that don't have filters. I never mind those kind of people. I actually love them because I know where they're coming from. They're straight shooters. And for me, that's very important. So, again, knowledge of self is going to be key. As kingdom heirs, knowledge of yourself is so key. Because knowing who you are as a person, knowing who you are in Christ, if you do that, there's nothing or there's nobody or anything that an enemy or even yourself or somebody around you can do to hurt you and to take away who you are and the blessing that you are supposed to inherit. So again, I'm excited to know that there are going to be people that are going to listen to this and they're going to take some evaluation. They're going to get to know themselves. And I don't care what age you are. whether you're young, old, it doesn't matter. You're getting to a place where you know who you are and whose you are, and your life is going to be so much better because now you're going to be more driven towards aligning yourself within those core values that you live by, or those principles that you use to help guide you through life. And it's just important to make sure that you understand that, because knowing who you are and then being an heir to the kingdom, knowing whose you are, when you pair those two together, it's really exciting, because it gives you a power and a purpose that, nobody can take away from you, and it puts you in a whole different place. And so, it's something to be excited about, self-exploration, to figure out, knowledge of self. It's something that will open you up, and it will enlighten you, and hopefully bring forth happiness and joy, and the pursuit of that. And it becomes a little easier because now you know where to go, because you know who you are. You know those things that are triggers for you that will take you down a path that you don't want to go. So that's why it's so important to know that information. And again, as a kingdom heir, it's important to know, because you can't flow in what God created you to do if you don't know who you are, you don't know whose you are. And God wants you to do that because, he wants you to be a partaker of the blessing, the blessing that he shared with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it is ours as kingdom heirs. We just have to flow in it. So I just thank you all for joining us again for another episode of the Airflow podcast. Please continue to listen at our website, www.airflowpodcast.com. That is HEIRFLOWPODCAST.com. You can find all of our episodes there. You can also find us on your favorite podcast player, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple Podcasts, whether it's iHeartRadio's podcast, Google Podcast. We're available in most of the major podcasting platforms. So please look us up there, and remember to like it and share it. And any feedback that you may have, our email address is airflowpodcast@gmail.com. So please feel free to write me and share that. I also have a Patreon site, and I'll share the Patreon site and link. But, if you're interested in being a contributor in the community, I'm really trying to build and grow this community. There's going to be some cool things that I'm going to have available, like special episodes that will be tailored just for the community. I'm also going to be starting video podcasting as well for some of these episodes, and a lot of them are going to be some special ones that I want to have available for the Patreon community. So, if you're interested in that, I'll share the link in the description, in the bio for this podcast episode. And please just take time, if you're interested in doing it. But as always, I appreciate the support. I'm going to continue to grow this, continue to grow myself. We'll continue to bring good content as well as great guests and great testimonies to continue to drive you and help you to be inspired and informed so that you can be the kingdom heir that you was created to be. So as always, just remember that as a kingdom heir, you were created to flow. So flow on.